Okay, so the background is as follows. So the story is, everybody know that Moshe Rabbeinu had to flee Egypt because he'd killed the Egyptian who was striking a Jew mercilessly. And he spends decades, friends, many decades in a place called Midian. And there he marries a woman called Zipporah, and they have two children, Gershom and Eliezer. And God appears to him, to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, the famous burning bush, and tells him that he's charged with the mission of going to Pharaoh and taking the Jews out of Egypt. He argues with God for a week, my friends, for a week, till he finally accepts the role. And we'll soon mention, what his chief arguments were. But before that, let's begin our commentary. Let's look at Rashi. So the Torah says like this. We'll do it in the English. So Moses took his wife and his sons, I mentioned the two boys, Gershom and Eliezer, mounted them upon the donkey, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. Now, when Rashi makes a commentary, it's only because there's an obvious question that even a 5-year-old would ask. Why is there a need for any commentary? The verse is pretty straightforward, doesn't seem to have any problems. So it would appear, and we're going to change our position at the end of our discussion, but the way most commentaries on Rashi, not most, everybody, understands why Rashi needs to comment is, why does it say the donkey? It should have said, mounted them upon a donkey. And the difference being, a donkey is a donkey. The donkey means, this is some kind of special donkey. Yeah, well, what makes it special? That's the question that requires Rashi's explanation, which we're now going to read in the taupe. That's the color there, the taupe box. So you see the words, they mounted them upon the donkey. Rashi is quoting from the verse and explains, indeed, the designated donkey, which is what? That is the donkey that Abraham saddled for the binding of Isaac. The Torah says that Abraham saddled the donkey with firewood and so on and went to Mount Moriah, ready to sacrifice his son. So this is the same donkey. And that is the one upon whom the King Moshiach is destined to appear. As it is said in the prophecy, he will be humble and riding on a donkey. End of commentary. So now we understand why it says because this is not just an ordinary donkey, but it has a history and an incredible future. Now, whether this is literal or not is another discussion, but we'll leave it as it is. Certainly at the end, we'll see the spiritual meaning. But that is Rashi's commentary. What are we going to do now? We're going to ask a number of questions on the way we understood Rashi. And these questions will compel us to understand what we just read on a much deeper level. Stage 1, just get what he's saying clearly. Stage 2, the spiritual meaning. That's already a whole different dimension, which we will share with you, which is what the objective, what I want to get to. You follow? We're going to analyze and question the way we understood Rashi now. What are our questions? If the problem is merely why the Torah says the donkey as opposed to a donkey, why does Rashi quote from the verse in the bold there, mounted them upon? They're not the problem. Those words is not the problem. The problem is not mounted them upon. It doesn't go on to say a donkey, but it says the donkey. So when Rashi brings words from the verse that he's commenting on, he brings those verses where we have our problem. The way we're learning now, our only problem is that it says the donkey rather than a. So why quote the words before that, mounted upon? Questions clear? Questions clear? You have to bring those words down. Those words are not the problem. His commentary should begin by quoting the words, the donkey. Clear? Yes, guys, feedback. Yeah?
Yes.
Second question. Every word in Rashi is precise. So why didn't you just go on and say this? That is the donkey that Abraham saddled. You don't have to add the words for the binding of Isaac. because we don't find he saddled any other time. The reader of Chumash has read what he learned till now and remembers it. So all he has to say is, oh, this is the donkey that Abraham saddled. And of course, we all know that it's the story of the binding of Isaac. There's no need to add those words. The reader knows that already. Every word in Rashi is precise. That's the second question. Third question, why is there a need to then also tell us, and this is the donkey that the King Mashiach will, actually in Hebrew, be revealed upon. The English isn't good, is destined to, upon whom the King Messiah is destined to appear. But the more literal is, he'll be revealed upon it. To answer the problem why it says the donkey, it's enough to know that it's Abraham's. You don't have to get more information. It actually doesn't give us more information unless it's critical for us to understand the verse. We've got our answer why it says that's the one that Avram used. You don't have to know more information about it to satisfy our understanding of the verse. So why does he bring this whole thing about Mashiach altogether? We don't need it to satisfy our question why it says the donkey. It's enough that Abraham used it. And furthermore, if you look up the source where Rashi gets it from, interestingly enough, he says, that's the donkey that the son of David will ride on. And he changes it and says that the King Mashiach will be revealed on. Well, why does he change the wording? That's another question. So we've asked a number of questions on the way we understood Rashi till now. In summary, why does he quote down the words mounted upon? Why does he add for the binding of Isaac? Why does he bring the whole Mashiach thing? We don't need to know that to understand why it says the donkey. And why does he change the source from where he quoted, rather than the son of David riding? He also said, he changes the language, that the King Mashiach will be revealed on him. And furthermore, one more question finally. The source text that he brings, humble and riding on a donkey, that's not the whole verse. It's only an excerpt. So if you're bringing an excerpt, you just have to bring the salient part, riding on a donkey, not humble. We don't need to have that part. There's other descriptions about Mashiach too. Just bring, when you're quoting a proof text, you just bring the salient words that are required for the proof text. So why does he bring the word humble also? And there are other problems as well. So this all forces us to understand that Rashi's problem actually is not so much why it says the donkey as opposed to a donkey. That's not really the problem that the reader has. The reader has a much simpler problem that Rashi is coming to answer. And that is the following. Why would the Torah tell us altogether how he got down there? What difference does it make? If he took a camel, if he took a horse, a train, or Uber, the verse should have told us God appeared to him, the whole story there. And Moses argued and eventually accepted the role. And then, so Moses took his wife and returned and children and returned to the land of Egypt. Do we have to know how he went? Why is that relevant at all? It's completely irrelevant. That's really the problem. That's the problem. Not so much why a donkey as opposed to the donkey, it's why donkey altogether. Why the means of transportation is irrelevant. Why would God's Torah point this out? Every word again is precise to the nth degree. It's to this that Rashi gives his explanation, and this is how we will now understand it. Moshe Rabbeinu, in resisting God, argued two things. One, I'm not worthy. I have an older brother, and you should, it doesn't make sense to give it to me. Please, you ask him to be the Redeemer. That's one protest. A second protest is, I see that this redemption will not be the final redemption. It won't culminate in the final redemption. There's going to be future exiles and so on. So he's resistant to start something that, anyway, he's not going to finish. In other words, send Mashiach, who will take them out once and for all of Egypt, and there won't be any persecution, exile after that. Why should I even? Well, I don't want to do this, he says, because it's going to be a long way before it is fully realized. So send your Redeemer now. Simple language. Don't send me, send your Mashiach. Moishe wants the Jews to be liberated, and it should be an eternal liberation, not followed as it did by 2,000 years of terrible persecution and exile. These were his two protests, and they're very valid. First is out of humility. Me, Aaron, he should be. I can't speak, and I'm just not a good leader. And besides, send the leader that will do the job completely, not me. Valid arguments. And God responds by him encountering this donkey. And in this donkey, as Rashi now explains it, he gets an answer to both of his protests. First of all, this is the donkey that Abraham saddled. And Rashi goes on to say, what? Saddling for what? It's important to stress, to sacrifice his son. Did that make sense? Did it make sense to sacrifice? Had all the legitimate reasons to argue for its murder. For number one. Number two, it flies in the face of your promise to me that my children will be a great nation. He has no children yet. You're telling me to kill him. And yet Abraham didn't ask any questions. He did it. So learn from him. Learn from him, from Abraham. This, you have a legitimate protest, Aaron, but your submission should override that. That's the first thing that God is telling him with this donkey. The donkey that Abraham saddled up with, for what? To offer his son. Moshe Rabbeinu, God says, God, he asked no questions, neither should you. As for your protest, which is perhaps even a deeper protest, but this isn't the final redemption. Send the Mashiach. Hashem says, well, this is the donkey that Mashiach will be revealed on. In other words, you're starting the process. It's not in vain. There's a whole process of redemption which will follow, and you are integral to it. So that's why Rashi has to bring the second thing to justify this donkey, because it's not, the issue no longer is why the donkey is opposed to a donkey, it's why a donkey altogether. And the answer now is because in the donkey is the answer to his protest that we just read about. And he had two protests. So Rashi gives two things about this. One, no questions, Abraham. Number two, Moishe Rabbeinu, it's not in vain. You're starting a process that will culminate the Mashiach's coming. And that answers why Rashi has to not just describe this donkey as King David, as the son of David riding on it, because that doesn't mention Mashiach clearly. He's got to change it and say, no, this is the donkey that Mashiach will be revealed on, because you are starting a process that's critical. You're the foundation of the final redemption. And you will be forever the role model and the inspiration for the Jewish people throughout our long and bitter exile, which will culminate in the final redemption, which you are starting the process. So you're part of it all. You're part of the whole Mashiach thing. In fact, you're starting it all, the final redemption. Now, as for why did Rashi bring down the words humble and riding on a donkey? Because this is also another answer to Moshe Rabbeinu's first protest. Moshe Rabbeinu is humble and says, not me, my brother is more worthy, he's older, I'm not capable. God's saying, that's what I'm looking for, humility. That's why I'm choosing you, because you don't want the job. That makes you the perfect humble leader. That's why Rashi adds the words when he quotes from Zechariah. He doesn't just quote riding on a donkey, which would satisfy us the way we first understood this whole thing. But now that it's an answer to Moshe Rabbeinu's protest, we understand how the word humble is critical, because this is answering his first protest, his humility. Great is God. That's why I'm choosing you. So now all is clear. Now all is clear why this lengthy Rashi, why the two virtues, because the protest, the question, that we have here is not so much why the verse says the as opposed to a donkey, but why mention it altogether? It's irrelevant how they got down there. Why do we have to know this? Forever. We quote it in Torah for posterity, for eternity. Answer we now have in this donkey, as Rashi explains it, it's a profound response to the two objections of Moshe Rabbeinu, unworthiness, and that it won't be a complete redemption. And now, friends, we're going to explain this on a spiritual level. Was this clear so far? Okay. So I just tell what we did. We learned a verse, we learned a commentary of Rashi. We understood Rashi's commentary initially, as everybody else did, till our Rebbe came along, as to what the problem of Rashi was. And we assumed the problem was a versus the. But But then we examined Rashi's commentary. There was so much there that was unnecessary to answer the A versus D problem. And then we introduced and suggested that's not the problem, a donkey versus the donkey. It's a different problem. It's why altogether mention the means of transportation. And now the answer is because this means that God arranged for him to find is God's answer to him for his two objections. And therefore Rashi gives these two incredible properties symbolized, conveyed by the donkey. Surrender to God's will when it makes no sense. And B, you're starting the process of redemption, which were his two objections. And C, your humility is the very reason that I'm choosing you. Which is why it's important to describe Mashiach as a poor, humble man. Okay, now friends, the spiritual dimension. You ready? Completely spiritual dimension. Very deep now, very beautiful. So what are we left with now? This donkey, again, it's largely symbolic, but appears at the word 3 times in history. Abraham, Moishe, and Moshiach. What's the significance? So the word for donkey in Hebrew is chamor. The Hebrew word for crass materialism is chomer, the very same root letters. Why is that? We all know the nature of the donkey is its stubbornness. Of all creatures, it's stubborn. Ego, it's symbolic of the ego. It won't budge unless it wants to. This world is a world that's governed. It's a stubborn ego world where everybody is holding their ground. That's what life is all about, right? It's about protecting your turf. That's where we spend most of our effort in. I'm not in business, but a little bit that I know. A lot of the effort that we're in a business is not so much making the money, but protecting the money from dishonest people, from someone that can take advantage. Securing it. Why? Because that's the nature of the world. This is what's the expression? It's well, in the words of Darwin, the survival of the fittest. And that's how it is. Dog eat dog. That's not the way it should be. The whole purpose is that God sent us down to the world is to transform the world and make the great revolution where the world is united, is humbled, is where God's presence is revealed. Where God's presence is revealed, there's unity and humility because everybody feels the truth, that everything is a gift from him and my life is a gift for him. And there's nothing to fight for or protect. We share. That's the Messianic era, where the coarseness of the world has been elevated and refined. The chomer, the donkey, the stubbornness has been transformed into devotion, surrender, to egolessness. In other words, to bring unity to a fragmented and fractured world. Why is it fragmented and fractured? Because of ego. When we transcend ego, when we sublimate the ego, rather, we transform the ego, then there's harmony and unity. So briefly, friends, there are 3 stages. There are 3 stages in transforming the chomer, the materialism of the world, the donkey, symbolic of the donkey, coarse, me, I, don't budge. Resistance to change, to movement. There are 3 stages: the Abraham stage in history, then there's the Moishe, then stage 2 symbolizes by the Moses of history, in history, and then the 3rd stage, the culminating stage, Mashiach. So I want you to note, friends, the use of the donkey, it changes. Let's just spell it out clearly and then explain. Avraham uses the donkey as a beast of burden. He loads it up. That's what Avram does. Literally, if you look at the language, I can't go into it now, but he presses it down with the load. That's what the word chovash. He weighs it down with the load and uses the donkey to transport the firewood, whatever it is. We're speaking now symbolically. Conclusion, Avram uses the donkey as to carry the burden. That's the description of the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, his wife and children ride on the donkey. The operative word here is ride. The operative word for Avram is not ride, but bear. We're going from bearing to riding, and then Mashiach will be revealed on it. So there are three stages, friends, symbolically in transforming the world. One is to first suppress it, then two, use it, and then three, it itself becomes godly. Mashiach is revealed on it. Let me explain what this means. In our service of God, friends, we need to go to three stages, these three critical stages. In our spiritual growth, first, the model's got to be the Abraham model, which means the world, we've got to resist the world, suppress the world. We've got to suppress our materialistic and selfish desires. We've got to focus on our souls, on spirituality. We've got to subjugate. For those of us that are familiar with the term iskafia, we've got to break ourselves. That's the beast of burden. We've got to exercise self-control. That's how it all begins. In our journey in Yiddishkeit, it's difficult. Self-control, you can't do this, you can't eat that, you can't do this, you can't go there, you can't have this relationship, you can't talk like this, you've got to do it this way, you've got to, it's difficult. The donkey is us, friends, our own ego. And materialism in general, the temptations of life, all have to be hammered into the ground, suppressed. That's what Avram is doing. Avram is suppressing the donkey. That's only stage one. At the end of the day, the whole purpose is this world. So now we've got to use the world. What does use the world mean? Go in business and make money and use it to give tzedakah. Eat and drink in order to get energy to serve God. The first level is control what you eat and what you drink. You can't eat this, you can't eat that. Even what's kosher, don't indulge like a behemoth. The first level is restraint, self-control. Once a person has achieved that, now he's ready to use the world. First one is like fasting a little bit. So you're not eating not kosher food. The beginning starts off it's just a lot of restraints and restrictions. But then from there, we move on to the next stage. So now you're eating, it's kosher food and so on. Use that energy, engage now. First one is suppress, resist. That's Avram. Moishe is now, his children, his wife are riding on the donkey. Use the material world in the service of God. Employ it, ride it. Use money to give tzedakah, eat and drink to have energy to do mitzvahs, have a beautiful home to invite guests. Use the world's resources. This is an example of the phone. The first thing when you get a phone is you got to learn what not to look at. You got to put filters, and we all human, whatever it is. Then, okay, now use it. It's a Torah. Tremendous things can be channeled and used positively. But first you've got to resist. It's the negative components. That's the second level now, is to use it. Again, simple example would be talking about food, to use that example. First level is you can eat this, etc., etc. Don't indulge and don't be behemoth. Focus on your soul, spiritual needs. Suppress the physical urges. Level two, channel the physical urges. Sexuality, marriage, mikveh, food, kosher. With that energy, serve God. Third level is Mashiach revealed, that's the Hebrew, revealed on the donkey. In the words of Rashi, Melech HaMashiach ligolis olav, he'll be revealed on it. What does that mean? Friends, the third and culminating level, which is the Messianic era, which is where the foretaste, where the bridge of it, is not even use the world as a means to serve. It's see God in the world. It's not eat with the energy you serve. It's kosher and everything, it's all good. Now use that energy, serve God. It's not work, make the money, now use it for tzedakah, use it to pay for tuition for your children, use it for good things. We're not talking about using. It's in the moment itself. It's a godly moment. While you're eating the sense of the divine, you see the godliness in the workplace. The workplace itself becomes a godly place. How so? You have a lunchtime shir there. You've got a minyan there. When you're talking with you in business, you're saying Baruch Hashem. The person looks at you and he sees godliness, the way you conduct yourself, your refinedness. And the moment itself is godly, not got the dollar, now I'm going to use it for something good. But this moment was just served a means for an end. This moment reveals God. That's the ultimate. That's Mashiach. He's revealed on the die, not just writing it, revealed on it, integral to this very moment. So this is the ultimate level of serving God, where we serve God. The body is not repressed, not a tool, but the body itself is part of the relationship. We appreciate the godliness within nature. Every moment itself is a moment of connection and relationship. Every moment I'm living with God in this moment, in this business, in this relationship, the way I eat, not later. I'll do this properly and I'll use it later. That's the ultimate. That's the third stage. So you're following? That's the deeper meaning here of this whole scenario. The donkey is symbolic of materialism, of ego. Level 1, suppress it. Level 2, exploit it or channel it. Level 3, transform it, make it part of the relationship. These are very deep ideas that need further exploration, but I think we have a basic idea at the end, and hope you enjoyed and have a wonderful Shabbos. And there should be only simchas, my dear friend.